Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And in today's lesson, first lesson of this new unit, we're going to be looking at evaluation and simplification. Now, in order to do this, we're going to be having to learn some new strategies such as substitution, elimination, and later on we're going to look at how to transform words into equations and to solve for those equations, which will lead us into systems of equations later on. For today's lesson, I'm going to break it down like we normally do, where we're going to do an example together. We'll do part A together, and then I want you to try to pause the video and try to do B and C by yourselves, and then unpause to check over your work. Okay? So as normal, I'm going to be writing down the steps in the corner. So when the question is asking evaluate, they are basically asking you to find out what the final answer is. Now, there's a reason why I use different colors for all these letters, and that's basically because when you're trying to evaluate, especially when you have letters, your first step, so I'm going to write them here in the corner. So your first step would be to change the letters into the given information. Okay, so let's do part A together. So in part A, we're going to use this yellow font here, me and my Pikachu yellow here. So first things first, well, I know P is 1, and I know Q is -1. Okay. The second you have that in place, you then want to solve using BEDMAS. Now, just to remind you, BEDMAS obviously is you wanted to go with brackets first, then exponents, then division, multiplication, addition, and then subtraction. So in this case, we want to deal with what's in our brackets first. And inside my bracket, I have my 1 plus minus 1. So when you see a plus minus, it basically is me saying this is -1. So in reality, inside the bracket, it's 1 minus 1. So let's finish inside our bracket. Inside our bracket, we have 1 minus 1, which is 0. 0 squared, well, 0 times anything would be 0. But just in case people forgot what this means, this also means when you have 0 squared, the squared basically means this is the same thing as saying 0 multiplied by 0. The 2 indicates how many times that number is multiplying, which would give me 0. So at this point, if you understand this, I want you to try the other two examples and then unpause it to check your work. Okay, and by the magic of the pause button, it's 1 second for me, it should be maybe a minute for you. I'm going to show you what the solutions of the next ones are. So, for this one, p squared, well, you're going to have 1 squared plus -1 squared. There is a reason why I put the -1 in brackets, and that's mainly so that I remember that, well, 1 times 1, 1 squared is 1 times 1, plus this 2 applies with everything inside the bracket, which means this is the same thing as saying -1 multiplied by -1. Okay? Which would be equal to 1 times 1 is 1. -1 times -1 is +1 because two negatives make it positive. 1 plus 1 is 2. So my final answer there would be 2. Let's going to split this up a bit. Sorry there, just squeeze it out. And finally, for the last one, again, first step, change the letter for my numbers. So I'm going to have 1 squared. Once again, I'm going to have -1 squared. So that's going to give me, same as I saw before, 1 squared plus -1 squared is going to give me 2. Square root of 2 is going to give me a decimal number, so I'm going to leave it as square root of 2. Or you can turn it into a decimal number, but if you do, make sure you put it in 2 decimal places. If you are putting in decimal form. Okay, so pretty straightforward so far. So let's step this up and look at some more complicated questions. Okay, so let's continue on here. So in these ones here, these ones are a little bit more complicated because now we've added the rules of division here, but the steps still remain the same. So once again, I'm going to do the first one together, and then I want you guys to try out the second one, okay? So it's going to be equal to, in the first one, I have a y divided by x. So you have -2 divided by my x, which is 1. And of course, minus w. W happens to be 3. Okay, now this one works out pretty nicely because here you have -2 divided by 1. And anything divided by 1 is itself. Now, if you weren't able to get rid of that fraction, your first step would have been to make common denominators. Because obviously you cannot add or subtract fractions if they don't have common denominators. But even though we don't see it, this is basically the same thing as saying 3 divided by 1. So at the moment, they are common denominators. And finally, you have -2 minus 3. Now this is not minus minus, this is a common mistake students make. So this should just be minus, because you know my final answer should be minus, because I have a minus here and a minus here. And 2, 3, this would be 5. Again, to refer you back to the video we made about like terms, this is the same thing as saying 2 apples plus 3 apples. Why are they both apples? Because they're both negative. They're both the exact same sign. Okay, so I want you to apply the same thing for the second part here. Take your time, pause the video, and I'll see you when you get back. So, welcome back. Now, of course, if you're not pausing the video, this kind of pause would sound kind of hilarious. But I'm assuming everyone's pausing the video. So, let's go into this. So the answer for this one should be, and I'm going to use the same color in this one, just to make it simple here. So x, which should be 1, minus, well, w was 3, and y was -2. Okay, divided by y, which again is a -2, plus w, which is 3, minus 2, multiplied by, remember, if I don't see anything in between, they are multiplying. 2 times whatever my x is, which in this case is 1. Okay, let's apply my bed math. So the best thing for you to do here is evaluate the top first. Okay, and then focus on the bottom. So forget the bottom is here right now. So I have 1 minus, well, I have 3, nothing in between, so they are multiplying. So I have 3 times negative 2, which is what people usually think. But remember, this minus belongs with the 3 as well. So in reality, this is minus 3 times minus 2, which should be a positive answer. So 3 times 2, which is 6. Okay, so we finished my top. On my bottom, let's go piece by piece. So negative 2 plus 3 is 1. So negative 2 plus 3 is equal to 1. And it helps if you do a side here, a little side for your notes if you have trouble doing it all in your head. I know negative 2 plus 3 is 1, and I know that minus 2 times 1 should be minus 2. So on the bottom, I should have 1 minus 2. Okay, so let's continue this. 1 plus 6 should be 7. 1 minus 2 should be negative 1. So therefore, my final answer should be 7 divided by negative 1. Your final answer will be negative 7. Okay. So that is the first step of these type of problems. Let's look at the last step, and we'll step it up once again here in terms of what we're going to be doing. Okay, so let's look at the last type of question we're going to look at here. So notice here I'm not saying evaluate anymore, I'm saying solve and simplify. Now in this question I am giving you what 3 of the variables are, but intentionally not giving you what one of the variables are. So once again, we're going to see how we do this with one example, and then I'm going to have you try out the second example, and then we'll do the third example together. Okay? So once again, I'm going to write the steps here in the corner. So in these type of questions, once again, the first step remains the same. So first step is the same as before. Now, just in case you guys have forgotten what that step is, that step was to replace every letter we were given with what we have. Okay? So I don't have what R is, so I'm going to leave that alone. I do know Y is 5. And I do know Z is minus 2. Okay? Now, my second step would be to isolate the variable we do not have. So just like before when we were solving linear equations, we now want to get the R, in this case, by itself because we don't have it. How do we do this? Well, we need to move away everything that is not the R by doing the opposite operation as before. So we're going to take this plus 5, we're going to move it to the other side. How we're going to do this? Well, if it's plus 5, you're going to subtract 5 from both sides. And that's going to leave me with the R is equal to, well, 5 minus 5 is 0, so the 5's gone. Minus 5, minus 2, this should be minus 7. R is by itself, so R is minus 7. Okay? So I want you to apply these same steps for the second one. So pause the video once again, and I'll see you when you come back. So, once again, this will seem oddly hilarious if you're not pausing the video, but welcome back. So what we're going to be doing here, once again, I'm going to be solving for my R here. So once again, I don't know what R is. I do know my X. I do know my z, and I do know my y. Now remember, the first step you always want to do here, just in case you guys have forgotten the steps of how you isolate, I'm going to write them up here in a different color. You want to get rid of fractions first. And then you want to get rid of additions and subtractions. And finally, multiplications. Okay, so in this case, we have a -2 on the bottom. How do I get rid of it? By multiplying every side. So multiplying the top here and the top here by -2. That's going to end up canceling out the -2's here, leaving me with r minus 3 is equal to 5 times -2, which should be -10. Once again, now I'm going to move the 3 to the other side. It's a -3, so I'm going to add 3 to both sides, which is going to give me, well, r is equal to -7. Now, there is a reason why I said to not do the last one until we take a look at it together. And that's mainly because this one is a little bit of a uniquer case, and a lot of people often struggle with this. So for this one, I'm going to make a little bit of room by just erasing the steps here. They should already be part of your notes that you've been writing this whole time. Okay. So, once again, our first step here doesn't really change. We still want to get rid of fractions first. And to get rid of the fraction, well, I have a fraction here. I have an r here. Okay? But once again, I'm kind of skipping my first step here. And remember, the first step is always substitute anything you have. So let's do that first. Let's see if it makes our job easier. Okay? So we should have here 3 for the x, 5 for the y, so 3 plus 5. So for r is equal to -2. Okay. Now, once again, I want to get rid of my fraction. Okay, to do that, I'm going to multiply both sides by r. Okay, which is going to end up getting rid of these r's here, leaving me with 3 plus 5. Well, 3 plus 5, well, that's 3 apples plus 5 apples. That's going to give me 8 apples. Is equal to -2r. I want to get r by itself, and it's being multiplied. So I'm going to divide both sides by -2, which will give me a final answer of r is equal to -4. All right, and that is it. That's all the examples we're going to be looking at for this lesson. So together we're going to be looking at the worksheet next, the one that's been posted up for you. Okay, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Have a good day.